Welcome to Hope is Here. My name is Greg Horn. I want to ask you, are you struggling with your finances? Is debt a four-letter word that causes you to use other four-letter words that are not God-honoring in your home? Have you lost hope that you can get control over your personal finances? Well, I've got good news for you today. Hope and help are here today. And today's guest is Barry Cameron. Barry is the author of the book, The ABCs of Financial Freedom, that I read along with my church back in 2012, and it was a game changer, not only for me, but many people at our church. And the best part about this book, The ABCs of Financial Freedom, is that the author, Barry Cameron, practiced what he wrote about. Barry and his wife, Janice, along with their 3 children, have been completely debt-free since 2001. So, Barry, first of all, thanks for joining us here from Texas on Hope is Here.
Thank you, Greg. It's good to be with you.
All right, well, I got to ask the natural question. Barry, why did you write this book, The ABCs of Financial Freedom?
Well, I never set out to write a book. I mean, it was just it was the result of a couple of things. Number one, when our family got out of debt, and I shared it with our church, there were other pastor friends of mine who said, "Hey, you got to come tell me and tell our church about that." And so I started doing that. And I had a friend that encouraged me. I'd done a 4-part series where I actually shared with our church, this is what we're doing, this is what we've done. And he listened to back then it was cassette tapes, and he listened to them and he said, "Man, you need to put this in a book form." I said, "I'm not an author. I don't know anything about writing a book." And but the process started there, and there was a publisher at the time, Heartspring Publishing, that said, "Hey, we'd like to publish that." And so we put our story on paper, and now here we are all these years later. It came out in 2001, and over 350,000 copies of it have been sold. And I've spoken in several hundred churches and to thousands of people. In fact, I'll be going this weekend up to Chicago to speak to a church, and they're all reading through the book, and their pastors preach a series of messages, and I'm coming in this weekend to do a leadership dinner and then speak on Sunday. And so we've been doing that for, ever since the book came out. So I never intended to write a book, and it's really just a story of our family and how we applied God's principles to our life to get out of debt.
Well, I do want to add on a personal note. Well, you did that sermon back, I believe it was 2012 at Northeast Christian Church here in Lexington. And Wayne Smith, the founding pastor of Southland Christian, who many of our listeners here in Central Kentucky well know of, he came and he sent me a note and said that was the best sermon he had ever heard about money and the church and things. And I know that Wayne Smith has meant a lot to your life. Can you just share a few words about what Wayne has meant to you, Barry?
Yes, sir. Wayne Smith was, I used to say he was like a father to me. He was a father to me. And, probably the number one greatest encourager in my entire life in ministry. We would talk at least every week, sometimes twice a week. He was, without question, the most generous man that I ever knew in my entire life. And, a lot of what I do today, I do because of Wayne. And I would always call him and ask him questions about ministry. And if I would have some problem or difficulty, he was always the first one on the phone to encourage me. But his love for people, his love for God, his love for the church, and his generosity, there's nobody else who's ever lived that's been as generous as he was. And so a lot of the principles that come through in the ABCs, I owe to Wayne. And so I remember being at Northeast back when we had the ABCs there, and Wayne was there. And after the service was over, he came up to me, and he told me that was the single greatest message on finances that he'd ever heard. And I said, "Now, Wayne, you've heard a lot of people. How in the world can you say that?" And he goes, "Because it's simple enough. Anybody can understand it." And he said, "It's something that everybody can walk out of here and do." And I've never forgotten that. And, we try to keep it simple. And I think because I'm a simple guy, it comes across that way in the book.
Well, that's why I wanted to have you. You're the first person that we've had on Hope is Here talking about finances and how to get freedom, as your book says, because so many people just lose hope over it. And the thing I wanted to have is, I echo what Wayne said. It's so true that you made it where anybody can understand it. And yet the thing I love even more about it, as I shared in our introduction, is that your family modeled this and decided to get debt-free. Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's it's a decision we make back in 1999. We were tired of living, check to check, and you get to the end of the month, and you have more bills than you have money, and it was just a miserable way to live. And I told our family, we had what we call a come to Jesus meeting, and I told them, life as you know it is basically over, and we're going to make some changes. And they said, what does that mean? And I started going down this. I said, we're going to get rid of cable TV. We're going to get rid of the newspaper. There were just all kinds of things I told them, and they didn't receive it real well at first. And in fact, my son, after that meeting, said, "Hey, thanks, Dad, for basically just ruining the rest of my life." Well, now he travels around the country and he speaks on the ABCs, and he tells people, "How would you like to be in a home where your dad comes home one day and says, 'Hey, life as you know it is basically over, and we're not going to go out to dinner anymore. We're not going to buy birthday gifts. We're not going to buy Christmas gifts. We're not going to go to movies, concerts. We're not going to do any of that stuff until we get out of debt.'" And then he says, "But I want to tell you, what my dad did is the greatest thing that ever happened in my life." And in fact, my son, just this past fall, he and his wife and their two sons got completely debt-free. Their house was paid for. Cars were paid for. They don't owe a dime to anything or anyone. And so they're modeling it. Both my daughters are debt-free as well. And it's just wonderful to realize we don't have to live according to the world's plan. The world says you got to do it with credit. You got to do it with debt. Can't buy a new car without debt. Can't buy a new house without debt. And that's simply not true. In fact, our country used to live completely debt-free. Our government, our grandparents, our great-grandparents, if they didn't have cash, they didn't get something. And we bought the lie of debt, and that's the only way to live. And the reality is there are thousands, if not millions of people now discovering, hey, they can follow God's principles and live a debt-free life, and it's a far better life because you can do whatever you want, whenever you want to do it.
You just tuned in. We're talking with Barry Cameron. He is the author of a book called The ABCs of Financial Freedom and a pastor in Texas, of Crossroads Christian Church. Barry, in chapter 1 of your book that I've read 2 or 3 times, just phenomenal book. You do the ABCs. You start off with the letter A, of course, attitude. You tell a great story about a man named Ted Horn. We're not related, unfortunately, but it was a great story. You mind sharing that story?
Well, it's really the story of a guy that was known as Secret Santa, and he became famous. He really hit the news the Christmas before in 1999. He handed out $85,000 in $100 bills to total strangers on the streets of Kansas City. But the story actually began back in 1971 down in Mississippi, a town called Houston, Mississippi, where he was a salesman, and he lived in a hotel, had a small office. And his boss would send him a paycheck every week and would pay for the office he was in, pay for the room at the hotel. But one day the employer went out of business and never told the young man. So he lost his motel room, he lost his office, he had to sleep in his car. He kept waiting for that paycheck to arrive, never came. He was out of gas, out of money, sleeping in his car. And so one morning he walked into a diner called the Dixie Diner. It was a small cafe there in Houston. And he ordered a huge breakfast. He got coffee and got refills, and all the time he was thinking, how am I going to get out of here without paying for this? And finally he pretended to lose his wallet, and the owner, who was also the cook, the waiter, the cashier, he was behind the counter. He noticed what was going on, and so he slipped from behind the counter and acted as if he picked something up. And he said to this young salesman, he said, you must have dropped this, sir. And it was a $20 bill. And the young salesman, he picked up the $20 bill. He left the tip for the waitress. He got out of there, went and got some gas in his car, and he left thinking, man, I just barely escaped. And then all of a sudden it hit him. That didn't just happen. He said, that man must have known I was in trouble, and he allowed me to keep my dignity. Well, later that year, he took a Greyhound bus to Kansas City. He got a sales job. He was still living paycheck to paycheck, but he became an incredible salesman, became a wealthy Jackson County businessman who every year handed out $50,000 or more of $100 bills for 26 years. Well, in the year 2000, which was the year before we got out of debt, he went to Mississippi, found this diner owner, Mr. Ted Horn, and he told him he wanted to come to Mississippi because he was doing research on this guy named Secret Santa, and he wanted to meet Mr. Horn. So he he came down, met with Mr. Horn, and Mr. Horn said, I remember that incident, that $20 incident. He said, it was in my diner. And Secret Santa said, I know, Mr. Horn, I was that young salesman. And he said, by the way, do you have any idea what that $20 bill is worth today in today's figures? And he said, I had somebody figure that out. Well, before he could do it, before Secret Santa could tell Mr. Horn the answer, which was about $120, Mr. Horn gave a response that fit right into Secret Santa's plans. He said, well, that $20 back then is probably like $10,000 to you right now. And he said, well, funny you should say that. He pulled out an envelope full of $100 bills with a strap of paper around it that said $10,000. And he gave it to Mr. Horn. Mr. Horn said, you don't need to do this. And Secret Santa said, no, I want to do it because you never know what one little act of kindness will do for somebody. He said, what you did for me changed my life. And, it's kind of sad. In November of 2006, Secret Santa actually died from cancer, began in his throat, spread to his liver. But it was only then when the world finally discovered that 50-year-old man named Larry Stewart had been the man that changed so many lives. And it all really goes back to Ted Horn, who changed Secret Santa's life by giving him $20 when he knew he was down in his luck. He was being generous.
And that's one of the beautiful things, isn't it, Barry? Once you get out of debt, you can do lots of generous things like that, can't you?
Absolutely. I mean, the things that we've been able to do as a family, the things that we've been able to do as a church, our church has been out of debt since 2008, and just the freedom that it gives you to be able, whenever God prompts you to do something, and you don't have to say, well, God, I'd like to, but I don't have the resources. Now you don't have to say no. And shortly after my wife and I got out of debt, I told my wife, I said, do you realize we don't ever have to say no again? And that was one of the blessings to getting out of debt, being able to help people. We've been able to help friends. We've been able to help preachers. We've been able to help widows and widowers. We've been able to help college kids. We've been able to help missionaries. Not our church. I'm talking about my wife and I. Just because of the freedom that you have, once every week when that paycheck comes, it's not pre-committed to all kinds of bills. You still have to pay electric, still have to pay water, but when your house is paid off, when your cars are paid off, those bills are very few, and you'd be amazed what you can do with the money you already have to be generous.
Well, I love just some of the list of the things that you told in the book that you all did to save money and to get out of debt. Things like, one, taking shorter showers and taking longer time in between haircuts. I mean, those little things add up, don't they?
Oh, there were tons of things we did. I mean, my son came to me whenever I said we got to cut back, and he said, "You got to cancel USA Today." And I said, "Well, son, that's where I get sermon illustrations from." He said, "Dad, that's not going to fly. You got to get rid of it." And we got rid of cable TV. We took sack lunches to school and work. All of us. I took a sack lunch. I was in a church that ran 1,500, almost 2,000. I took a sack lunch to work every day. We didn't go out to eat. We didn't get our dog groomed. We didn't go to movies. We didn't get haircuts. We did that at home. My wife and 2 daughters shared bath water. I know it sounds kind of gross, but you do what you got to do when you get out. You get out of debt. We turned down a lot of invitations to do things with other people. We didn't buy any new clothes. We didn't go on vacations for 2 years. We carpooled to church in one car to save gas. We had a garage sale. We turned our thermostat up in the summer, down in the winter. We turned lights off when we left the room. We unplugged anything that blinked, buzzed, hummed, or gave any indication it was costing money. We did everything we could. We didn't buy DVDs or CDs. We didn't buy furniture. We didn't put Christmas lights on the outside of our home. I mean, what a waste. You put Christmas lights on the outside of your home, which is going to cost you electricity, and the people are going to drive down your street, and in most cases they're going to say, well, that doesn't look as good as that other house. I mean, what's the point of that? Now, we've put them up since we got out of debt, but we didn't do it before that. All of our kids had to, if they wanted to do something, they had to get a job, whether it was doing stuff at school or camp. We developed a principle of using half as much of everything and found out it lasts twice as long, whether you're talking about shampoo, toothpaste, whatever. Even my wife cooking meals. We just stretched everything out and used half as much. And it's amazing what you can do to save money and get out of debt. I mean, we even stopped watering our grass. We had people who would drive by our house and they'd make hand motions and they weren't waving at us. I mean, you can use your imagination. And they would even leave brochures about sod companies and sprinkler systems. And the fact of the matter is, once we get out of debt, we put in a brand new sprinkler system, and all new salad, paid cash for it. We had the nicest yard in the neighborhood. But when we couldn't afford it.
Barry, I got to cut you off there. I hate to do that to you, but he's going to be back with us tomorrow, so stay tuned with us. Tomorrow we're going to keep talking with Barry Cameron, the author of the book, The ABCs of Financial Freedom, and we'll talk about lies that sound like the truth on Hope is Here.